How long did you work at the MG car factory?
Just short of 40 years altogether. It wasn't a continuous 40 years. I went there in 1930 as a young lad. After getting on for 4 years, I had a fairly long illness and I had to leave. And then I didn't go back until during the war. I went in the army. I was discharged because of poor eyesight. And I went back to MG's again about 3/4 of the way through the war, I should think, when it was very, very different. And then after the war we got back to making cars again, and I went into the goods inwards office. That was where everything came into the factory, into goods inwards, the parts that made the cars. And I eventually took charge of the goods inwards and the goods dispatch.
The goods inwards department was where all the little parts that make up the car actually came through?
Everything that came into the factory came into goods inwards.
And then what, you distributed them to the various sections?
It was offloaded, booked in, brought on charge, and then it was transferred to inspection department, and from then into the stores, and then eventually onto the assembly lines, and then onto the cars, of course.
Tell us about the first time you met Mr. Kimber.
Well, I'd only been there for a very, very short time, and the other people there had left me in no doubt as to what sort of a man Mr. Kimber was. Said he was a real martinet, a tyrant in fact. I don't think this was quite true, but as a young lad, you know, I believe this. It was a different attitude in those days, you know, to your parents, to policemen, to park keepers and everyone like that. You know, you had a certain respect for them, and I certainly did for my employer, which was Mr. Kimber. And one morning I came out of an office and was walking up this long passageway with no turnings off either side, and my horror was coming towards me the other way, but Mr. Kimber. Although I'd done nothing, as far as I knew, to be in trouble, I was absolutely terrified, and hopefully tried to hurry past him, but he stopped me and called me to him. I stood there in rather fear and trembling, and then he glared at me as he glared at everyone at that time, and then suddenly he smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and he said, and how are you getting on, laddie? All right, are you? That's good, keep it up. And he went off one way and I walked the other way, only by now I was about 10 foot tall. And I'd always remembered that story, and how kind he was in his way, you know, to a young lad, put me at my ease. And when I retired from MG's 50 years later, my wife gave me McComb's book on MG's, and there was a chapter in there in which McComb interviewed Jean Kimber, and it thought struck me how much I'd like to write to Jean Kimber or get in touch with her. And 4 years later, quite by accident, I got her address, and after another little delay, because I really didn't think she'd be interested, I wrote to her, and she wrote back and she started, "Dear Mr Simpson, you don't know how much your letter meant to me." And she went on like that for about 5 pages. She was certainly interested. I've met her several times since, and I think we've become very good friends. I've given her some old photographs, and we've talked MGs and her father. Incidentally, she said that's just how he was at home. He was a bit of a tyrant in some ways to everyone, but a highly respected man, a very great man. Not very big in stature, but he was tremendous, and it's a pity he hadn't lived and continued at MG's. Eventually, after the war, a lot of people that had been brought in to work on war work, they left MG's and they went back to not only Abingdon, you know, but all over the country. And they were trying to get back on car production. And one day a chap asked me if I'd like to join the Works Fire Brigade, because at that time I didn't even know they got a Works Fire Brigade. But a lot of the people who'd been in it had left, and they were down to about 3 members. and I really hated the idea of it. But he was rather persuasive and said, well, come along on Monday and see if you like it. I went on Monday and I did not like it. But I couldn't think of a good excuse to get out of it, so I went the following Monday for practice and the following Monday and found myself liking it. And so I stayed in the brigade for 35 years. The last 14 of which I was the MG Works fire officer. And it was one of the best things I've ever done. I thoroughly enjoyed
What was that like?
Well,
Yeah,
in the
just
fire
job.
brigade,
Yeah, what did you do?
it was good. Well, if there was a fire or a fire alarm, the alarm went out and we turned out to the fire station and tackled the fire, if there was one. It seemed to consist mostly of false alarms, fortunately, which is a good thing really, because good housekeeping means no fires, and that's a good fire brigade. If you get fires every day, you know something's wrong. And we practiced once or twice a week after work, and then in the summer we had several fire brigade competitions in different parts of the country we used to go to, and we were reasonably successful. We got a number of cups and trophies and things, and it was a good day out anyway. The pay was very, very poor for firemen, but it did ensure that people joined it who wanted to join the fire brigade. They didn't care about the money. It was belonging to the fire brigade that counted, and we kept most of the firemen together for 20, 25 years, something like that.
And that was in addition to your regular work?
That was in addition to the regular work, yes, which I enjoyed very much. I enjoyed being in goods inwards, because all the lorries coming in from all over the country, I met so many different people. Most of them very, very nice people, one or two objectionable ones, but you get that everywhere. And the work was, although it was repetition of a sort, it was quite interesting. It did change a bit every day. And as foreman in goods inwards, I think I was blessed, and I must say blessed, with about the best crowd of workers they had at MG's, or any other works, come to that. They were a grand lot, and they were very supportive.
What was it like working there?
I enjoyed it.
Good work?
Yes, I think everyone did. They said it was a family concern, and in many ways it was, because there were several grandfathers, fathers and sons working, 3 generations. One family, we had 4 generations working there at the same time. And it was nice, because being a fairly small company, you knew such a lot of people, knew them intimately, and they were all friendly. And I think the worst day of all was the day they told us MGs were coming to an end. We'd had the week before the 50 years in Abingdon celebration. It culminated in this marvellous procession round the town. There were about 84 floats representing different things, like the hospitals and different organisations, and interspersed with them were about, I should think, at least 200 cars. Mostly MGs, 1 or 2 Rileys, which we made for a time, and Heelys. And it was a really marvellous day. And then we went back to work on the Monday, and they said, it's all finished.
Yeah, how did you feel over this weekend, seeing all these cars?
Oh, great. It was really great. And I don't know if you saw, when you came away from there today, down Cemetery Road, on the right-hand side, a chap in a wheelchair, an ex-employee, he's had a stroke. He can't walk, he can speak. A little chap named Jock Cameron. And he watched the cars go by, and the tears streamed down his face. And he wasn't there very long, you know. I must say, I felt a lump in my throat about it all. And meeting the people, they've all been so nice and so friendly. It's one of the highlights of my life, I think, today.